The morning sun rose over New Bizan like it had for the past 20 years since humans first settled on this world. Captain Lee Dong-wook stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching the golden light spread across the rice fields below. The sight always reminded him of Earth, of the home his family had left behind when they joined the colony ships heading for the stars. His sister, Haijin, would be starting her rounds at the medical center soon. She always began early, checking on the alien patients first. The Keth children with their blue skin and large eyes needed special care, and the elderly Morven traders who stopped by for treatment during their long journeys across space. Haijin treated them all the same way she treated humans. With kindness, with patience, with hope that different species could live together in peace. Dong-wook smiled as he thought about his sister. She was everything good about humanity. Everything that made other species trust them. The humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy as the peaceful ones, the helpers, the species that would rather build bridges than walls, rather heal than hurt. Captain, incoming transmission from the diplomatic vessel, called Lieutenant Park from the communications station. Commander Kim Tae-sung wants to speak with you. Dong-wook walked over to the main screen. Kim Tae-sung appeared, his face serious but calm. The commander had been working on peace talks with the Valkyrie Empire for months now. It was delicate work. The Valkyrie were a proud warrior species, tall and strong, with scales that shimmered green and gold in the light. They had built a massive empire by conquering other worlds, but they had never fought humans before. Dong-wook, how are things on New Bizan? Kim asked. Quiet as always. The harvest is coming in well. Dr. Park says the medical exchange program with the Keth is going better than expected. Why? Is there news from the talks? Kim paused for a moment. Something flickered across his face. Worry, maybe. Or doubt. The Valkyrie representatives seem ... lately more aggressive in their questions. They keep asking about human military capabilities, about how many worlds we have, about our population numbers. That's normal for a warrior culture, isn't it? They probably just want to understand our strength. Maybe, Kim didn't sound convinced. Just keep your eyes open, brother. Something feels wrong about this whole situation. The Valkyrie War Marshal Vekvar has been asking very specific questions about human colonies. Questions that feel more like intelligence gathering than diplomacy? Dong-wook nodded. He trusted Kim's instincts. The commander had been dealing with alien politics for years, ever since humanity first made contact with the galactic community. If Kim was worried, there was probably good reason. I'll increase patrols around the colony. Nothing obvious, just more eyes watching the sky. Good. I'll contact you again tomorrow. Kim out. The screen went dark, leaving Dong-wook alone with his thoughts. He looked back out at the peaceful settlement below. Families were walking to work, children playing in the streets, farmers heading out to the fields. It was the kind of life humanity had dreamed of when they first left Earth. Simple, safe, free. 2 hours later, Dong-wook was walking through the colony's main street when his communicator buzzed. It was Haijin. Brother, can you come to the medical center? We have some visitors. When he arrived, he found his sister talking with 3 Valkyrie traders. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scales catching the light from the windows. One of them, apparently their leader, was speaking in the harsh, clicking language of their people. They're asking about our defensive capabilities, Haijin said quietly in Korean. They want to know how many soldiers we have, what kind of weapons. I told them I'm just a doctor, but they keep pushing. Dong-wook stepped forward, switching to Galactic Standard. I'm Captain Lee, Defense Commander for this colony. Can I help you? The lead Valkyrie turned to him, yellow eyes studying him carefully. I am Trader Vexmar. We are conducting ... surveys of this region for trade purposes. What kind of surveys require military information? We must know if trade routes are safe, if colonies can protect themselves, if... Vexmar paused, as if choosing his words carefully. If inhabitants are worth protecting. Something cold moved through Dong-wook's chest. The way the Valkyrie said that last part didn't sound like a trader asking about security. It sounded like a predator deciding if prey was worth hunting. Our defenses are adequate for our needs, Dongwook said carefully. We've never had any problems with raiders or pirates in this sector. No raiders, no pirates. Vexmar's mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth. Among the Valkyrie, this was supposed to be a smile. It looked like a threat. What about larger threats, such as wars, invasions, the need to evacuate quickly? Haijin moved closer to her brother. She had been treating Valkyrie patients for 2 years, and she had never heard one talk like this. There was something wrong in Vexmar's voice. Something. Hungry. We're a peaceful colony, she said. We don't have enemies who would want to hurt us. Peaceful. Vexmar repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. Yes, humans are always peaceful, always helping, always weak. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Dongwook felt his hand move toward his sidearm, then forced himself to stop. Starting a fight with Valkyrie traders would create the exact kind of incident that could ruin the peace talks. Is there anything else we can help you with? He asked instead. No, we have learned what we came to learn. Vexmar turned to go, then stopped. Captain Lee, Dr. Park, enjoy your peace while it lasts. The 3 Valkyrie walked out, leaving the humans standing in confused silence. That evening, Dongwook sent a detailed report to Commander Kim aboard the diplomatic vessel. Something was definitely wrong. The Valkyrie weren't acting like traitors, they were acting like scouts. Like soldiers preparing for something. Meanwhile, in the deep space between star systems, vast Valkyrie fleets were moving through hyperspace. War Marshal Vekver stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching star charts that showed every human colony, every human world, every place where the peaceful species had made their homes. The scouts have finished their reports, announced Sub-Marshal Kexthin. The humans have minimal defenses. Most colonies have only small garrisons. Their ships are designed for exploration and trade, not war. Excellent. Vekver's claws clicked against the metal railing. And their population centers? Concentrated. And cities, easy targets. Most of their medical and educational facilities are clearly marked. No attempt to hide their civilians. They make it almost too easy. Vekver studied the data flowing across his screens. Millions of humans living their simple lives, unaware that death was traveling toward them at faster than light speed. They are too trusting, too kind, too weak to survive in a galaxy where only the strong deserve to live. The fleet is ready. War Marshal. All 12 target worlds are within striking distance. We can begin the cleansing at your command. Vekver looked at the list of human colonies. New Bizen, New Sol, Terra Nova, Garden World, Haven, 12 thriving settlements, where humans grew food, healed the sick, raised children, and believed that the universe was fundamentally good. Tomorrow, he said, at dawn by their local times. Let them see the sun rise one last time before we show them what real strength looks like. Back on New Bisan, Dongwook couldn't sleep. He stood again on the observation deck, looking out at the peaceful colony. Everything looked normal. Everything looked safe. But something deep in his mind was screaming warnings that he couldn't quite understand. In the medical center, Haijin was finishing her late rounds, checking on patients who needed care through the night. She hummed quietly as she worked, the same song their mother used to sing when they were children on Earth. Neither of them knew that in a few hours their peaceful world would become a burning hell. Neither of them knew that humanity's time as the quiet species was about to end forever. The first sign of trouble came at 6:47 in the morning, local time. Dongwook was drinking his coffee when the alarm began screaming through the defense station. Red lights flashed across every screen, and Lieutenant Park's voice cracked with, "Panic, Captain, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace." Valkyrie signatures, but these aren't traitors. Dongwook ran to the main display. What he saw made his blood turn cold. 12 massive Valkyrie warships hung in space above New Bisan, like dark metal clouds. Each ship was 3 times larger than anything in the human defense fleet. Their hulls bristled with weapons that could turn cities into glass. "Get me a line to the colony administrator," Dongwook ordered. "Sound the evacuation alarm. Get everyone to the shelters." But even as he spoke, he knew it was already too late. The Valkyrie ships were positioning themselves in perfect formation above the planet's major population centers. This wasn't a random attack. This was planned. This was precise. This was extermination. The lead warship opened fire. The beam that struck New Bizan's capital city was white-hot and silent from space. On the ground, it was the end of the world. The entire downtown district vanished in a flash of superheated plasma. 20,000 people died in the first second. The hospital where Haijin worked disappeared in a ball of fire that could be seen from orbit. "Haijin!" Dongwook screamed into his communicator. "Haijin, respond!" Only static answered him. More beams lanced down from the Valkyrie fleet. The agricultural centers burned. The schools burned. The residential districts burned. Everything that made New Bizan a home for 30,000 humans was being systematically erased. Dongwook watched helplessly as his sister's medical center took a direct hit. The building where she had spent years healing both humans and aliens simply ceased to exist. In its place was only a crater of melted rock and ash. "Sir, we're getting emergency transmissions from other colonies," Lieutenant Park reported, tears streaming down his face. "Terra Nova is under attack. Haven is under attack. All 12 colonies are being hit simultaneously." On the colony ship New Sol, 50,000 settlers were preparing for their final approach to their new homeworld when the Valkyrie found them. Engineer Choi Minho was in the engine room, making final adjustments to the landing systems, when the first missile struck. "What was that?" asked Technician Lee from across the room. Minho checked his instruments. The readings made no sense. Something just hit the outer hull. "Multiple contacts? Big ones?" The ship shuddered again. This time, Minho heard the sound that no spacer ever wanted to hear, the whistle of air escaping through a hull breach. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the massive vessel. "All hands, this is Captain Yun," came the announcement over the ship's intercom. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. All passengers report to emergency stations. This is not a drill." Minho ran toward the nearest observation port. What he saw outside made his legs weak. Valkyrie fighters swarmed around the New Sol like insects around a dying animal. They weren't trying to disable the ship. They weren't demanding surrender. They were systematically tearing it apart section by section. "The passenger compartments," Minho whispered. His wife Ji Young was in their quarters with their 2 children, probably trying to keep them calm while the ship died around them. He ran through corridors that were filling with smoke and the screams of 50,000 people who had never done anything wrong except believe they could build a better life among the stars. Emergency doors slammed shut as the ship's computer tried to contain the damage, but there was too much damage. Too many holes. Too much death. Minho reached the passenger section just as a Valkyrie fighter put a missile through the hull 20 meters from his family's quarters. The explosion threw him against the wall and filled his ears with the sound of metal tearing apart. When the smoke cleared, he saw space where his home had been. Young was gone. 5-year-old Sujin was gone. 8-year-old Taeho was gone. Gone into the cold vacuum of space with 3,000 other passengers who had been sleeping peacefully. When the attack began, something broke inside Minho's mind. Something that would never heal. He stumbled to an escape pod and launched himself into space just as the New Sol's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the darkness like a new star, and in that light, Minho saw the true scope of what was happening. Valkyrie ships were everywhere, hunting down the smaller escape vessels one by one. They weren't leaving survivors on Earth. Admiral Yoon Jae-yuk received the first distress signals at 0800 hours. At first, he thought it was some kind of mistake. 12 human colonies couldn't all be under attack at the same time. It wasn't possible. Then the video feeds started coming in. Yoon watched in horror as orbital bombardment turned thriving cities into seas of fire. He watched Valkyrie ground forces move through the ruins, shooting anything that moved. He watched alien soldiers drag human children from their hiding places and execute them in the streets. "Sir," reported his aide, Commander Song Hai-young, "we're receiving similar reports from all 12 colonies. This isn't random violence. This is organized genocide." The feeds kept coming. On Terra Nova, Valkyrie troops had herded survivors into the town square and were killing them one by one. On Haven, they had bombed the evacuation shuttles as they tried to take off, burning families alive in vehicles that were supposed to save them. Yoon had been a soldier for 30 years. He had seen war, he had seen death. But he had never seen anything like this. The Valkyrie weren't just killing humans. They were enjoying it. They were taking their time. They were making sure it hurt. "Get me a secure line to the Defense Council," Yoon ordered. "All members, emergency session, now." "Sir, what should I tell them the meeting is about?" Yoon stared at the screen showing human worlds burning. Children running from soldiers who shot them for sport. Hospitals bombed while doctors tried to save the wounded. Everything good and peaceful about humanity being systematically destroyed. "Tell them," Yoon said quietly, "that humanity is at war." Back on New Bizin, Dongwook's defense station was the last thing standing. The colony below was nothing but fire and rubble. 30,000 people were dead. His sister was dead. Everything he had sworn to protect was gone. A Valkyrie landing craft approached the station. Through his weapon scope, Dongwook could see alien soldiers preparing to board. They were coming to finish the job. He activated the station's self-destruct sequence and grabbed his rifle. If he was going to die, he would take some of them with him. But as he prepared for his final battle, Dongwook felt something new growing inside him. Something cold and hard and patient. Rage. Not the hot, quick anger of a moment. This was deeper. This was the kind of rage that would burn for years. The kind that would remember every detail, every face. Every death the Valkyrie had made a mistake. They had left survivors. Dongwook was still alive. Minho was still alive. Others were still alive. And every single one of them would remember what had been done here. The escape pod that carried Dongwook away from his burning world also carried something else. A message that would be broadcast across human space? A message that would change everything. "This is Captain Lee Dongwook of New Bizin Colony. The Valkyrie Empire has attacked our worlds without warning. They have murdered our families. They have burned our homes. They have shown us what they think of human mercy and human peace." Dongwook's voice was steady, but his eyes were the eyes of a man who had watched his world die. "We remember their lesson. We remember it very well. And we will teach them what? They have awakened. The age of the quiet species was over. The age of the monster was about to begin." 6 months after the burning of the 12 worlds, humanity had vanished from the galaxy. Their trade ships stopped coming to alien ports. Their diplomatic vessels went silent. Their peaceful colonies that had survived the attacks pulled back behind defensive barriers and refused all contact. The other species thought the humans were hiding in fear. They were wrong. Deep beneath the red surface of Mars, in tunnels that had been carved from solid rock, humanity was becoming something else. The survivors of the 12 worlds had been brought here, along with every human military officer, every engineer, every scientist who might help with what was coming next. Dr. Kang Subin stood in Laboratory 7, looking down at the Valkyrie prisoner strapped to the examination table. 3 months ago, she had been a xenobiologist who studied alien life forms to understand them better. She had written papers about Valkyrie biology, about their unique respiratory system, about their fascinating social structures. Now she was learning about their weaknesses. Subject shows sensitivity to subsonic frequencies between 15 and 18 Hz. She noted into her recorder. Exposure causes disorientation and nausea. Extended exposure leads to organ failure. The Valkyrie on the table was unconscious. Subin had made sure of that. She wasn't cruel enough to make her subjects suffer during the experiments. But she also wasn't merciful enough to stop the experiments. Every piece of information she gathered might save human lives in the war that was coming. She had learned that Valkyrie bones were strong but brittle, that their scales could be dissolved by certain acids, that their nervous system had vulnerabilities that could be exploited. She had learned how to kill them efficiently, quietly, and in large numbers. The old Subin would have been horrified by what she was doing. The old Subin had taken an oath to preserve all life, not just human life. But the old Subin had died on New Bisan along with 30,000 other people who had believed that kindness was strength. "Dr. Kang," called her assistant. "General, Lim wants to see you in the weapons development section." Subin saved her files and walked through the underground complex that had become humanity's new heart. The tunnels stretched for hundreds of kilometers beneath Mars, hidden from any sensors that might detect them. Here, the survivors were building something that would make the galaxy tremble. She found General Lim, Seokjin, standing before a massive holographic display showing ship designs. These weren't the exploration vessels that humans had once built. These weren't the peaceful cargo haulers that had carried families to new worlds. These were weapons, pure and simple. "Doctor, what can you tell me about Valkyrie population centers?" Lim asked without turning around. "They prefer warm, humid climates. Their cities are built around thermal vents and volcanic activity. Large families live in shared complexes that can house thousands." "Thousands," Lim smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "So, if we target their thermal infrastructure, we could cause maximum civilian casualties." The old Subin would have protested, would have pointed out that killing civilians was wrong, would have reminded him that humans were supposed to be better than that. The new Subin simply nodded. "I can design biological agents that would be particularly effective in those conditions." Nearby, engineer Choi Min-ho was working on the prototype of humanity's first Death Fleet vessel. The ship he was designing looked nothing like the peaceful colony transport that had carried his family to their deaths. This ship had one purpose: to find Valkyrie worlds and make them uninhabitable. Min-ho had lost weight since the attack on the New Sol. He barely slept. He barely ate. He worked 18 hours a day designing weapon systems that would make the Valkyrie pay for what they had done. His hands moved across the control panels with mechanical precision, but his eyes burned with a fire that never went out. "The plasma cannon array is ready for testing," reported his assistant. Min-ho looked at the specifications. The weapon he had designed could crack a planet's crust from orbit. It could boil oceans. It could turn entire continents into radioactive wasteland. "Good," he said. "Now design it bigger." In another section of the complex, Captain Lee Dong-wook was training with the first human Wraith units. These weren't the soldiers humanity had once fielded. Those had been peacekeepers, defenders, guardians who tried to protect innocent life. The Wraiths were hunters. Dong-wook moved through the training course like a ghost. His rifle was silent, his movements were fluid, and every shot found its target. But this wasn't just marksmanship training. This was something darker. "Remember," he told the 40 soldiers training with him, "the goal isn't just to kill them. The goal is to make them understand what they did to us, make them feel the fear, make them know that death is coming and they can't stop it." The soldiers nodded. Every one of them was a survivor of the 12 worlds. Every one of them had watched their families burn. Every one of them had been changed by fire and lost into something that the old humanity wouldn't recognize. "Sir?" asked Sergeant Kim Do-hyeon. "What about Valkyrie civilians? What about their children?" Dong-wook's scarred face showed no emotion. The burns he had received escaping New Bisan had healed, but they had left marks that would never fade, just like the marks on his soul. "Did they care about our children?" he asked quietly. The training resumed. The soldiers practiced moving through mock Valkyrie settlements, learning how to strike terror into alien hearts that had never known fear. They learned to be the monsters that the Valkyrie had created. Admiral Yoon Jae-hyuk stood in the command center, watching reports flow in from across human space. Every surviving colony was contributing to the war effort. Every factory was being converted to produce weapons. Every peaceful human citizen was learning to become a warrior. "Admiral," reported Commander Song Hai-young, the First Death Fleet. "Squadron will be ready in 3 months. 12 ships, each capable of sterilizing a planet. Only 12, for now. Production will increase as more shipyards come online. Within 2 years, we'll have enough firepower to glass every Valkyrie world simultaneously." Yoon studied the tactical displays. The Valkyrie Empire controlled 87 star systems. Their total population was estimated at 40 billion. It was a massive undertaking, what humanity was planning. It would require resources, time, and a level of coordinated brutality that the species had never attempted before. "What about the other galactic powers?" I asked. "The Zephyrians? The Titanids? They're watching, waiting to see what we do. Some of them sent diplomatic messages expressing sympathy for our losses." "Sympathy," Yoon's voice was flat. "They watched the Valkyrie commit genocide and did nothing. Now they offer sympathy." Song nodded. "Should we respond to their messages?" "Yes, tell them that humanity appreciates their concern. Tell them that we're handling the situation ourselves. Tell them that they should stay out of our way." In the deep tunnels of Mars, humanity was learning lessons that would echo across the galaxy. They were learning that mercy was a luxury that only the strong could afford. They were learning that kindness was seen as weakness by species that respected only force. They were learning that sometimes, to protect what you love, you had to become something terrible. Dr. Subin finished her research notes and looked at the data she had gathered. She knew exactly how to kill Valkyrie efficiently now. She knew how to make them suffer. She knew how to design weapons that would target their biology specifically. The old her would have been ashamed. The new her felt only satisfaction. Engineer Minho completed the final design for the plasma bombardment system and submitted it for production. Soon, dozens of ships would carry his weapons to Valkyrie worlds. Soon, alien families would burn. Just like his family had burned, the old him would have wept for the innocent lives that would be lost. The new him felt only anticipation. Captain Dongwook dismissed his wraith soldiers and walked to the observation deck that looked out over the training facilities. Thousands of humans were learning to be killers. Learning to be the terror that strikes in the darkness. Learning to be everything that humanity had once fought against. The old him would have tried to find another way. The new him knew there was no other way. The galaxy had taught humanity a lesson about power and survival. Now humanity was ready to teach that lesson back. The monsters were almost ready to hunt. The Valkyrie mining world of Kethver had been peaceful for over 200 years. Its 3 million inhabitants lived in vast underground cities carved from the planet's rich mineral deposits. They had never seen war. They had never known fear. They were proud citizens of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved countless species. They were unprepared for what came out of the darkness between the stars. Fleet Commander Oh Sang-woo stood on the bridge of the human warship Vengeance as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethver system. Behind him, 11 other vessels appeared like hunters emerging from the shadows. These weren't the exploration ships that had once carried humans to the stars. These were predators built for one purpose only. "Begin sensor sweep," Oh ordered. "I want to know the location of every Valkyrie ship, every defense platform, every possible means of escape." His crew worked in silent efficiency. 6 months of preparation had turned them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Human soldiers who didn't hesitate. Human officers who felt no mercy. Human warriors who had learned that the only way to prevent another genocide was to commit one themselves. "Sir, detecting 47 Valkyrie vessels in system. Mostly cargo haulers and mining ships. 5 military escorts, but they appear to be standard patrol craft. Any communication from the planet? They're trying to hail us. Standard trade protocols. They think we're here for business." Oh almost smiled. The Valkyrie still thought of humans as the peaceful species. The traders, the helpers, they had no idea what was coming for them. "Open a channel." The face that appeared on the screen was typical. Valkyrie, scaled, reptilian, with the arrogant bearing of a species that had never lost a war. Sub-Commander Vorthak looked at O with casual curiosity. Human vessel, this is Kethver Control. State your business in this system. Our business, O said quietly, is with you. The human fleet opened fire. The first salvo destroyed the Valkyrie. Patrol ships before they could raise their shields. Plasma beams designed by engineer Minho turned proud warships into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The mining vessels tried to run, but the human ships were faster, deadlier, and absolutely merciless. O watched the tactical display as his fleet systematically hunted down every Valkyrie vessel in the system. This wasn't a battle, this was an execution. Every escape pod was targeted. Every survivor was killed. Nothing that could carry word of what was happening here would be allowed to leave. Sir, the planet is attempting to surrender, reported his communications officer. Ignored. Begin orbital bombardment. The weapons that Dr. Kang Subin had helped design fell from the sky like the wrath of an angry god. But these weren't simple explosives. These were bioweapons, tailored specifically for Valkyrie physiology. Viruses that would eat through their scales. Toxins that would shut down their nervous systems. Acids that would dissolve their bones. On the planet below, 3 million Valkyrie civilians watched their sky turn red with death. Captain Lee Dongwook led the first Wraith unit assault on the planet's main city. His soldiers moved through the underground tunnels like ghosts, appearing without warning in places where Valkyrie families had gathered to hide from the bombardment. The first Valkyrie that Dongwook encountered was an elderly female trying to protect a group of younglings in a shelter. She held up her clawed hands in surrender, speaking rapidly in her own language. The words didn't matter. Dongwook had learned to understand the universal language of terror. Please, she said in broken galactic standard. We are not soldiers. We are miners, we are families. Dongwook looked at her through the targeting scope of his rifle. The scars on his face, burns from the day New Bison died, seemed to pulse with remembered pain. So were we, he said, and pulled the trigger. The Wraith units moved through the underground city like a plague. They didn't just kill quickly and move on. They took their time. They made sure the Valkyrie understood what was happening to them. They made sure they felt the same terror that human children had felt when Valkyrie soldiers had hunted them through burning streets. In one shelter, Sergeant Kim Do-Hyeon found a Valkyrie family huddled together, parents protecting their young, just as human parents had tried to do 6 months ago. The similarity should have given him pause. Should have reminded him that these were people, not just enemies. Instead, it filled him with rage. Do you know what your people did to New Seoul? He asked the father. Do you know how many human children died screaming in the vacuum of space? The Valkyrie male tried to answer, but Do-Hyeon wasn't interested in conversation. He activated a device that Dr. Kang Subin had designed, a sonic weapon tuned to Valkyrie hearing. The family writhed in agony as sound waves tore through their nervous systems. Do-Hyeon watched them suffer and felt nothing but satisfaction. Above the planet, Fleet Commander O monitored the ground assault through his ship's sensors. The bioweapons were working exactly as designed. Valkyrie by the thousands were dying in ways that would have horrified the old humanity. Their cities were becoming tombs. Their proud civilization was being systematically erased. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from other Valkyrie worlds, reported his communications officer. They're asking about Kethver. They want to know why the planet has gone silent. Let them wonder, O said. Fear is a weapon too. Let them imagine what might have happened here. Let them lose sleep wondering if they're next. Should we respond to their transmissions? O considered this. The old human diplomatic protocols called for clear communication, for explaining your actions, for trying to find peaceful solutions. Those protocols had died with the 12 worlds. Send them this, he said finally. Tell them that Kethver has learned what happens to species that murder human children. Tell them that this is only the beginning. On the planet below, the last, Valkyrie resistance was crumbling. The proud warriors who had once bombed human hospitals found themselves hunted through their own streets by soldiers who moved like shadows and killed like machines. They called for help, but no help was coming. They begged for mercy, but mercy was a word that no longer existed in the human vocabulary. Captain Dongwook stood in the central plaza of the main city, surrounded by the bodies of 3 million Valkyrie civilians. His Wraith soldiers moved through the ruins, making sure there were no survivors. This had to be complete. This had to be absolute. This had to be a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Sir," reported Sergeant Kim, "the city is secure." No survivors detected. Dongwook activated his communicator. "Fleet Commander, the ground operation is complete. Kethver is dead." "Understood, Captain. Prepare for extraction. We have other worlds to visit." As the human ships prepared to leave the dead system, Dr. Kang Subin's bioweapons continued their work. The viruses she had designed would linger in the atmosphere for years, making the planet uninhabitable for any Valkyrie who might try to return. The underground cities that had once housed millions of people would become vast tombs, monuments to what happened when you awaken something that should have been left alone. Captain Han the Cell, monitoring galactic communications from her ship in deep space, intercepted the first panicked transmissions from Valkyrie Command. The messages were confused, terrified, filled with words like impossible and inhuman and monsters. "They're calling emergency sessions of their war council," she reported to Admiral Yoon. "They're pulling ships back from the frontier to defend their core worlds. They're scared." "Good," Yoon replied. "They should be scared. They created us. Now they get to live with what they made." The first human victory was complete. But it wasn't really a victory in any traditional sense. It was a statement, a declaration, a promise of what was coming next. The galaxy was beginning to understand that the quiet species was quiet no more. In their place was something that remembered every slight, every death, every burned world, something that had learned to speak. The only language that the universe seemed to understand, a language of fear, and humanity, was just getting started. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime had hosted thousands of meetings over the centuries. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered here to discuss trade disputes, territorial conflicts, and diplomatic solutions to problems that arose across the galaxy. But today was different. Today, the ancient hall buzzed with a fear that no one wanted to admit they felt. Councillor Mordeth of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the central podium, his crystalline form catching the light as he addressed the assembled delegates. The Zephyrians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, having achieved spaceflight when most others were still discovering fire. Their wisdom was respected by all. "Fellow beings," Mordeth began, his voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems, "we are here to discuss a situation that threatens the stability of our entire galactic community. The human species has begun what can only be described as a campaign of total warfare against the Valkyrie Empire." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The delegates had all heard the reports, but many had dismissed them as exaggerations. Surely the peaceful humans couldn't be capable of what the intelligence reports suggested. "The evidence," Mordeth continued, activating a holographic display, "is undeniable." The chamber fell silent as images filled the air above them. Kethver, once a thriving mining world, now a dead rock where nothing would grow for 1,000 years. Valkyrie ships found drifting in space, their crews dead from weapons that attacked their nervous systems directly. Entire fleets that had simply vanished, leaving only debris and unanswered distress calls. In the past 3 months, Mordeth sighed, humanity has destroyed 17 Valkyrie worlds. Not conquered, not occupied, destroyed, every man, woman, and child dead. Every city reduced to ash, every trace of Valkyrie civilization wiped from existence. Delegate Threxnel of the Aquatic Consortium raised one of his tentacles. "Surely this is revenge for the attack on the human colonies. Tragic, yes, but understandable, given their losses." "That," said a new voice from the chamber's diplomatic section, "is exactly what it is." All eyes turned to see Ambassador Huang Jisoo walking toward the speaker's platform. She was the last human diplomatic representative still active in galactic politics, and she had requested permission to address the council today. What shocked the assembled delegates was her appearance. The humans they remembered had been soft, kind-faced people who smiled easily and spoke of cooperation. This woman was different. Her eyes were cold and calculating. Her movements were precise and controlled. When she looked at the alien delegates, they felt like prey being studied by a predator. "Honored counselors," Jisu said, her voice calm and professional. "My species wishes to clarify our position regarding the current military actions against the Valkyrie Empire." "Please, Ambassador," Mortis said, "help us understand. The humans were once the most peaceful species in the galaxy. What has changed?" Jisu smiled, but it was an expression that contained no warmth whatsoever. "What changed, Counselor, is that we learned what happens to peaceful species in this galaxy. We learned that kindness is seen as weakness. We learned that when someone tries to exterminate your entire race, the appropriate response is not diplomacy." She activated her own holographic display. The images that appeared made several delegates look away. Burning human colonies. Children fleeing from Valkyrie soldiers. The colony ship New Soul exploding with 50,000 civilians aboard. The Valkyrie Empire attempted to commit genocide against humanity. They attacked 12 of our worlds simultaneously. They murdered 3 million human civilians, including women, children, and elderly who posed no threat to anyone. They did this without warning, without declaration of war, without any provocation except their belief that we were too weak to deserve existence. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the species that had supported the Valkyrie in previous conflicts found it difficult to argue with what they were seeing. "We are simply returning the favor," Su continued. "The Valkyrie wanted to teach us about strength and survival. They wanted to show us how the galaxy really works. We are grateful for the lesson. Now we're teaching it back to them." "Counselor." Varthik of the Titanid Federation stood up, his massive form towering over the other delegates. "Ambassador, surely there must be limits. War is one thing, but the complete extermination of a species ... is exactly what they tried to do to us." Jisu finished. "And they very nearly succeeded. If humanity were to disappear tomorrow, how many of you would actually care? How many of you would do anything more than send messages of sympathy?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The truth was that most of them had viewed humanity as useful but ultimately expendable. Peaceful species came and went in galactic politics. The strong survived. The weak were forgotten. "The Valkyrie made a simple mistake," Jisu said. "They assumed that because we were peaceful, we were weak. They assumed that because we preferred cooperation to conquest, we were incapable of warfare. They were wrong." Delegate Clicksmore of the Trade Federation raised a claw. "What are humanity's demands? Surely there must be terms for peace." Jisu's smile grew wider and somehow more terrible. "Our demands are simple. The complete surrender of the Valkyrie Empire, the execution of all military leaders who participated in the genocide of human worlds, war reparations to be paid in Valkyrie blood, and a formal acknowledgement that the human species is not to be trifled with. And if the Valkyrie refuse these terms, then we will continue our current course of action until there are no Valkyrie left to refuse anything." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. This wasn't the diplomatic language that species used when discussing conflicts. This was the language of extinction. Counselor Mordith called for order. "Ambassador, you must understand that the complete destruction of an entire species sets a dangerous precedent. If conflicts are resolved through total warfare, then perhaps species will think twice before attempting genocide," Jisu interrupted. "The Valkyrie chose to make this a war of extermination. We're simply better at it than they are." On the other side of the galaxy, General Beek Duyun was leading the assault on the Valkyrie fortress world of Grimtar. This wasn't like the mining colony of Kethver. This was a military installation, heavily defended, manned by the elite warriors of the Valkyrie Empire. It didn't matter. The human death fleet appeared at the edge of the system like a plague of metal locusts. 50 ships, each one designed for a single purpose: the complete annihilation of everything that lived on the planet below. "Sir, the Valkyrie are broadcasting surrender terms," reported his communications officer. "Ignored," Duyin replied without hesitation. "Begin bombardment." The weapons that had been designed in the deep tunnels of Mars fell upon Grimtar like the judgment of angry gods. But this time, the humans weren't content with simple destruction. They had brought special weapons. Weapons designed to send a message. Dr. Kong Subin had outdone herself with the bioweapons deployed on Grimtar. The viruses didn't just kill. They preserved the victims' nervous systems just long enough for them to experience every moment of their death. The proud Valkyrie warriors who had once laughed at human weakness died screaming in agony that lasted for hours. The planet's death throes were broadcast across Valkyrie space. Every Valkyrie world received the transmission. Every Valkyrie citizen watched their greatest warriors die like insects being slowly crushed. The message was clear. This is what happens when you cross humanity. Back in the council chamber, Ambassador Jisoo was concluding her address to the galactic community. "We understand that our methods may seem extreme to species that have never faced extinction. But we would ask you to remember one thing. We did not start this war. We did not choose this path. The Valkyrie forced us to become what we are now." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who suddenly realized they were looking at representatives of a species that had become the galaxy's apex predator. "The old humanity is dead. They died on the 12 worlds 6 months ago. What you see before you is what the Valkyrie created. We are what happens when you try to murder the human species." Isu gathered her materials and prepared to leave. "We will continue our operations against the Valkyrie Empire until our objectives are met. We strongly advise all other species to stay out of our way." As she walked from the chamber, the assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. They had witnessed something that would change the galaxy forever. The peaceful species that had once been their allies had become something that might be even more dangerous than the Valkyrie had ever been. And the terrifying part was that humanity was just getting started. The siege of Velcros Prime lasted 47 days. It was the longest any world had held out against humanity's death fleets, and only because the humans wanted it that way. They could have destroyed the Valkyrie homeworld in hours, but that would have been too quick, too merciful, too clean. General Baek Diyun stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching the planet's capital city burn in the distance. For 47 days, his forces had systematically dismantled the Valkyrie civilization piece by piece. First the orbital defenses, then the military installations, then the industrial centers, then the civilian infrastructure. Now only the government district remained, and in it, the last defenders of a species that had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries. "Sir, we've captured War Marshal Thekver," reported Captain Song Minwook. "He was trying to escape through the underground tunnels." Duyun nodded. Thekver, the architect of the human genocide. The one who had ordered the attacks on the 12 worlds. The one who had watched 3 million humans die and called it a good start. "Bring him to Interrogation Bay 7 and activate the galaxy-wide broadcast system." "Sir, I want everyone to watch this, every species, every world. Every being in the galaxy needs to see what happens when you try to exterminate humanity." On the planet below, Captain Lee Dong-wook led his Wraith units through the ruins of what had once been the grandest city in Valkyrie space. The streets were littered with the bodies of soldiers who had fought to the last, civilians who had been caught in the crossfire, and the children who had hidden in shelters that offered no protection from human fury. Dong-wook felt nothing as he stepped over the corpses. The man who had once grieved for his sister, who had once believed in peace and cooperation, was gone. In his place was something that existed only to make the galaxy understand the price of crossing humanity. "Sir, we've secured the government complex," reported Sergeant Kim Do-hyeon. "Minimal resistance. Most of them killed themselves rather than face capture. Cowards, Dongwook said. They were brave enough to murder human children, but they can't face the consequences. They found the Valkyrie High Council in their emergency bunker, huddled together like the human families they had ordered destroyed 6 months ago. The irony was not lost on Dongwook, but it brought him no pleasure. Nothing brought him pleasure any more except the systematic destruction of everything Valkyrie. Please, begged Council Leader Mortok, holding up his clawed hands. We surrender. The war is over. You have won. Dongwook looked at the alien through his rifle scope. The war was over the day you attacked New Bizon. Everything since then has just been the cleanup. He pulled the trigger, and the last government of the Valkyrie Empire ceased to exist in space above the dying planet. War Marshal Vekfer was brought before the cameras that would broadcast his final moments to every world in the galaxy. The proud warrior who had once commanded fleets now wore shackles, designed by human engineers specifically for Valkyrie physiology. Every movement caused him pain. Dr. Kang Subin stood beside the examination table where Vekfer was restrained. The woman who had once saved lives now specialized in ending them as slowly and painfully as possible. She looked at the alien who had ordered the death of her people and felt only scientific curiosity about how long she could make his suffering last. War Marshal, General Duyin said, his voice carrying across the broadcast to billions of watching. Aliens, you stand accused of genocide against the human species. Do you have anything to say before sentence is carried out? Vekfer raised his head with difficulty. Even in defeat, even facing torture and death, he maintained the arrogance that had defined his species for millennia. We should have killed you all, he gasped. Should have made sure no humans survived. You are abominations, monsters. Yes. Duyin agreed. We are monsters. You made us into monsters. And now the galaxy will see what monsters can do. What followed was broadcast live to every world, every species, every civilization that had access to galactic communications, Dr. Subin's work was methodical, scientific, and absolutely merciless. She had spent months learning exactly how to inflict maximum suffering on Valkyrie physiology, and she demonstrated her knowledge with the precision of an artist. Vekfer's death took 17 hours. Every minute was recorded. Every scream was transmitted across the galaxy. When it was finally over, the message was clear. This is what happens to those who commit genocide against humanity. But the victory brought no satisfaction to the humans who had achieved it. In the medical bays of the human fleet, Dr. Park Min-young studied psychological profiles of the soldiers and officers who had carried out the war. What she found horrified her. Min-young had been a colleague of Dr. Park Hae-jin on New Bizon, had worked beside Dongwook's sister to heal both humans and aliens. She had survived the attack only because she had been off-world at a medical conference. Now she was seeing what the survivors had become, and it terrified her more than the Valkyrie ever had. Complete suppression of empathy, she noted in her report, inability to form emotional connections, persistent fantasies of violence against non-human species. Classic symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress disorder, but magnified across an entire population. She looked at the brain scans of Captain Dongwook, taken during his last medical exam. The areas responsible for compassion and emotional regulation showed significant damage. Not physical damage, but psychological scarring so severe that it had actually changed the structure of his brain. We've created a nation of sociopaths, she whispered to herself. We've turned ourselves into the very thing we used to fight against. But even as she recognized the horror of what humanity had become, Min-young found herself unable to care. She had watched the recordings of her friends dying on New Bizon. She had seen the footage of human children being hunted through burning streets. And when she tried to feel sympathy for the Valkyrie civilians who were dying by the millions, she felt only cold satisfaction. The transformation was complete. Humanity had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Across the galaxy, other species watched the fall of Velcros Prime with growing alarm. In the council chambers of the Arcturian Republic, President Veltar called an emergency session to discuss what the intelligence reports were telling them. The humans have destroyed the entire Velkari Empire, reported Defense Minister Korthan. 87 worlds, 40 billion dead. Complete extinction of the species. In 6 months, added Foreign Minister Luxiel. They went from nearly extinct to the dominant military power in the galaxy in 6 months. President Veltar studied the tactical analyses. What are their capabilities now? How many ships? How many soldiers? Unknown. They've become completely secretive about their military strength. Our best estimates suggest they now have the largest fleet in galactic history, with weapons technology decades ahead of anything we've seen. And their intentions? That's what worries us. Before the war, humans were predictable. They wanted peace, trade, cooperation. Now, we don't know what they want. We don't know how they think. We don't know what they might do next. On the other side of the galaxy, the hegemony of worlds was having similar discussions. High Commander Zifak paced before his war council, studying intelligence reports that painted an increasingly frightening picture. They're not stopping, he said. The Velkari Empire is gone, but human fleets are still active. They're hunting down Velkari survivors, Velkari refugees, anyone with even partial Velkari ancestry. They're not content with victory. They want complete extinction. Perhaps, suggested Tactical Advisor Morden, we should make contact. Offer alliance, show them that we supported their cause. Did we support their cause? Zithak asked. When the Velkari were committing genocide, what did we do? We watched. We stayed neutral. We let it happen. The War Council fell silent. The truth was that every major galactic power had chosen to do nothing when humanity was being destroyed. They had seen it as someone else's problem. They had believed that staying out of it was the safe choice. Now they were beginning to realize that their neutrality might have created an even bigger problem. Admiral Song Haiyang, monitoring galactic communications from her intelligence vessel, detected the formation of new alliances across known space. Species that had never cooperated before were suddenly sharing technology, intelligence, and military resources. The pattern was clear. They were preparing for war against humanity. Admiral Yoon, she reported through encrypted channels. We're seeing unprecedented cooperation between former rival species. The Arcturians, the Hegemony, the Zephyrians, even some of the minor powers, they're forming some kind of coalition. Against us? It appears so. Intercepted communications suggest they view humanity as an existential threat to galactic stability. Admiral Yoon was quiet for a long moment. When humanity had been weak and peaceful, the galaxy had ignored them. When they had been victims of genocide, the galaxy had watched in silence. Now that they had become strong, the galaxy feared them. How long before they're ready to move against us? Unknown, but sir, they might be right to fear us. Look at what we've become. Look at what we've done. Are we still the species that deserves to survive? It was a question that would haunt humanity for generations to come, in their fight to prevent Thai. The attack came without warning, just as the Velkari attack had 1 year earlier. But this time, it wasn't a single species trying to destroy humanity. This time, it was everyone else. Operation Twilight began at 0600 hours, Galactic Standard Time. 57 different species, commanding over 3,000 warships, struck at human positions across the galaxy simultaneously. The Arcturian Republic, the Hegemony of Worlds, the Zephyrian Empire, the Trade Federation, even minor powers that had never shown interest in military action, all of them united by a single shared fear: humanity had become too dangerous to let live. Admiral Yoon Jae-hyuk received the first reports while he was reviewing intelligence data in his command center on Mars. The displays around him lit up with red warning signals as human outposts across the galaxy came under attack. Sir, we're detecting massive fleet movements, reported Commander Song Haiyang. Every major power is moving against us simultaneously. This is coordinated. Yoon studied the tactical displays. The alien alliance had learned from the Velkari's mistakes. Instead of targeting human colonies, they were going after military installations. Instead of trying to commit genocide, They were attempting surgical strikes to cripple human war-making capability. "They think they can contain us?" Ian said quietly. "They think if they destroy our fleets, we'll go back to being the peaceful species we used to be. Can they succeed, sir?" Yoon almost smiled. The aliens still didn't understand what they were dealing with. They still thought of humanity as a normal species that could be defeated through conventional warfare. "Activate the Omega protocols," he ordered. Song's face went pale. "Sir, the Omega protocols were designed as a last resort. If we implement them, then the galaxy learns what happens when they try to cage a monster." For the past year, while the galaxy watched humanity destroy the Valkyrie Empire, human engineers had been working on projects that went far beyond simple military conquest. They had been preparing for the day when the rest of the galaxy would turn against them. Fleet. Admiral Ko Jae-min commanded the human response from his flagship in the Outer Rim when the alien coalition struck at human positions in the Centauri sector. They expected to find a few dozen human warships defending isolated outposts. Instead, they found a swarm. "Sir, sensors are detecting over 500 human vessels," reported his tactical officer. "They're emerging from hidden positions throughout the system." The aliens had made a critical error. They had assumed that human fleets were centralized, that destroying visible military bases would cripple human capabilities. They had no idea that humanity had spent the past year dispersing their forces, hiding ships in asteroid fields, building secret shipyards in empty space. "All vessels, weapons free," Ko ordered. "Show them what they've awakened." The battle for the Centauri sector lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the combined fleets of 12 alien species had been completely destroyed. Not one human ship was lost. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Lee Dong-wook led a strike force against the Arcturian homeworld. The aliens had expected this to be a war of position and maneuver. They had expected time to organize their defenses, to call for reinforcements, to negotiate. Dong-wo. OK gave them none of those things. His death fleet appeared in orbit above Arcturus Prime and immediately began bombardment. But these weren't the weapons humanity had used against the Valkyrie. These were something new, something worse. "Deploy the Grey Death," Dong-wook ordered. Dr. Kang Soo-bin's final creation fell upon the Arcturian capital like invisible rain. The nanobots were too small to detect, too fast to stop, and programmed with one simple instruction: convert all organic matter into raw materials for manufacturing more nanobots. The proud crystal cities of Arcturus Prime began to dissolve. The Arcturians themselves, beings of living mineral who had thought themselves immune to biological weapons, discovered that Soo-bin's creations didn't distinguish between organic and inorganic life. "Sir, we're receiving surrender transmissions from the planet," reported his communications officer. "Irrelevant," Dong-wook replied. "Continue deployment." Within 12 hours, Arcturus Prime was a dead world. Not just lifeless, actually dead. The nanobots had consumed everything, leaving behind only a perfectly smooth sphere of converted matter that would serve as a monument to what happened when you threatened humanity, the pattern repeated across the galaxy. Wherever the alien coalition struck, they found themselves facing forces far beyond what they had prepared for. Humanity had learned from their near extinction. They had prepared for this day. They had become something that couldn't be contained or controlled. On Zephyros, the ancient crystal beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia watched their civilization crumble as human weapons targeted their harmonic resonance frequencies. Their bodies, which had survived for thousands of years, shattered like glass on Titan IV. The massive armored warriors of the hegemony discovered that human plasma weapons could cut through their legendary defenses like paper. Their fortress worlds became graveyards on Aquatica. The ocean-dwelling consortium found their seas boiling as human ships deployed thermal weapons that turned their entire planet into steam. The war that was supposed to last months was over in weeks. The coalition that had taken a year to organize was destroyed in days. The galaxy that had united to stop humanity discovered that they had only succeeded in showing humanity how many threats still existed. In the ruins of the Galactic Council Chamber, Marshal Lee Dongwook stood among the bodies of delegates from 47 different species. The chamber that had once hosted peaceful discussions between civilizations was now a tomb. Behind him walked the survivors of his wraith units, soldiers who had fought on 100 worlds, who had witnessed the destruction of entire species, who had become living weapons in the shape of human beings. "Sir," reported Colonel Min Taeyang, "we've confirmed the destruction of all major galactic powers. Total casualties estimated at 200 billion across 83 worlds." Dongwook nodded. The numbers were abstract to him now. He had lost the ability to comprehend individual suffering when he watched his sister die on New Bizon. 200 billion was just data. Any survivors? Scattered refugee populations. Minor species that didn't participate in the coalition. Primitive worlds that haven't achieved spaceflight yet. "Let them live," Dongwook said. "For now, they can serve as a reminder of what happens when you threaten humanity." In a small research station orbiting the ruins of Earth's moon, Dr. Jung, Su Young worked alone among the records of what humanity had once been. She was one of the few people left who remembered the old human civilization. The gardeners, the healers, the dreamers who had reached for the stars with hope instead of weapons. She activated her recording device and began to speak to whoever might find her message in the future. "We were gardeners once," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We grew food and healed the sick and explored the stars with wonder. We believed that the universe was fundamentally good, that different species could live together in peace. We were wrong." She paused, looking out at the empty space where thriving alien worlds had once orbited their stars. "The Valkyrie taught us that survival requires strength. The galaxy taught us that mercy is seen as weakness. We learned their lessons very well, perhaps too well." The recording device hummed quietly as she organized her thoughts. "When you judge what we became, remember what we were. Remember that we tried peace first. Remember that we offered cooperation and received genocide in return. Remember that every species in this galaxy had a chance to stand with us when we were victims and chose to watch in silence instead." She stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the vast emptiness that had once been filled with the lights of 1,000 civilizations. We are all that remains now, the human species, alone in a galaxy that we inherited through violence. We are the apex predator of a universe that taught us that only predators survive. Dr. Jung Su Young sealed the recording and set it to broadcast. On all frequencies, a message for any future civilization that might discover what had happened here. This is our legacy. This is what the galaxy created when it tried to destroy the human species. Remember us not as heroes or villains, but as the inevitable result of a universe that worships strength and despises compassion. She looked one last time at the dead systems visible through the window, then returned to her work. There was still research to be done, still knowledge to preserve, still a future to build among the ashes of what had been. Humanity had survived. They had won. They were the undisputed masters of the galaxy, and they were more alone than any species had ever been. The quiet species was truly quiet. Now, because there was no one left to talk to.